Hey everyone. Welcome to the first editorial at the Creative Leadership Podcast. It's the first one, yay. Very cool that you're actually listening to me. I hope you enjoy this one. So this first one, I really wanted to dive into the topic that is central to how we innovate and how we lead and how we navigate this bonkers world we're kind of experiencing right now. There's a metaphor I really like to use. It's the image of a tightrope walker. Okay, so all right, here we go. So picture yourself on a tightrope, arms stretched out, wobbling just enough to keep your balance. It's a little scary, but it's also exhilarating, right? Because you're not frozen in place, you're in motion. You're making micro adjustments, constantly shifting between the pull of order on one side and the lure of chaos on the other. That's the sweet spot where the magic happens. So today we're going to look into this, this wonderful kind of space to hang out, this edge of chaos. And we are also going to look at what change blindness is and how it can trip us up if we're not careful, and how all of this helps us become better leaders and innovators, creatives. So let's start with this idea of the edge of chaos. I really love how complexity science describes it as a sweet spot between rigid order and total mayhem. On one side, if things are too structured, like an organization with layers upon layers of bureaucracy, creativity gets stifled. People get stuck following the same old processes, or they're terrified of breaking the rules. On the other side, if there's too much chaos, everything becomes so scattered that no real process is made. It's like everyone's running around in different directions without a shared purpose. But right at the edge, that's where we get both innovation and stability. There's enough structure to keep us moving together, but enough freedom to experiment and try bold ideas. Nature offers plenty of examples. There's a well-known concept called the intermediate disturbance hypothesis, which basically shows that ecosystems hit peak biodiversity, peak life, when there's a moderate amount of disruption, too little disturbance, and the system gets stale, too much, and it collapses. So the same logic applies to businesses and teams. Think of a company like Google. They famously gave employees 20% time to explore big, wild ideas. There was a bit of chaos sprinkled into their daily work. But they also had a framework in place, enough organization to decide which of these ideas would move forward. It wasn't anarchy, but it wasn't stifling order either. It was a dynamic balance right on the edge. Now, I want to be clear. Order by itself isn't a bad thing. We need some structure to keep us grounded and consistent. The problem is when order turns into a straitjacket, when people say, well, we've always done it this way, and shut down new ideas. In some organizations, there's a heavy reliance on rules, processes, and top-down directives. They can create efficiency in the short run, but it can also kill spontaneity and discourage experimentation. Leaders who micromanage end up with teams that follow the script, but don't bother to innovate. Everyone's so busy coloring inside the lines that no one asks, hey, can we draw something completely different? I'm guessing you've seen this or felt this before, times when rigid policies and endless approvals made it feel impossible to introduce new thinking. So yes, order is useful until it drains your ability to adapt. Now on the flip side, we have chaos. So in small doses, chaos is amazing for creativity because it lets us wander off the beaten path. But when anything goes, we can get stuck spinning our wheels. For example, you might have a startup where there are zero rules. Everyone's always prototyping the next big thing, but no one's thinking about actual implementing whatever they came up with. That's fun for a while, but eventually the team runs out of cash because there's no strategy. So I like to remind people, innovation without a framework can lead to a lack of follow-through. You need some structure to ensure your brilliant ideas don't end up collecting dust. Nature also shows us this danger. If storms or fires are too frequent, even the hardiest species can't survive. There has to be enough calm between the disruptions to stabilize and grow. So we know we need to walk that tightrope, balancing between too much structure and too much chaos. But here's a twist. What if we don't even see the rope changing beneath our feet? That's where a concept called change blindness comes in. Change blindness is this fascinating phenomenon where we fail to notice slow, subtle shifts happening right in front of us. If something changes slowly or in small increments, it can sneak by us undetected. Psychologists have run experiments showing that people can miss huge alterations in a scene if those alterations happen gradually. So translate that to the business or leadership world. You might be so focused on day-to-day tasks that you miss a major shift in customer behavior or technology or even in your own team's morale. Think about Kodak. They invented the first digital camera, but didn't quite act on that technology. By the time they realized how big digital would become, other players had seized the opportunity, or blockbusters. Blockbuster, yeah, they saw Netflix coming, but they didn't move quickly enough to adapt because the change felt gradual until it wasn't. We often say, in hindsight, it was so obvious, but it's only obvious later. In the moment, we're often blind to the slow creep of change, like the proverbial frog in slowly heating water, which is a metaphor because actually frogs do notice. I haven't tried it, but I think people did, and they will escape. But the metaphor still works. So how do we get better at walking this tightrope, staying on the edge of chaos while also combating change blindness? So here's a few practical tips that come to mind. Stay curious and keep scanning the horizon. Make it a habit to look beyond immediate tasks. Ask yourself and your team, what's changing around us, even if it's subtle? Is there a shift in customer tastes? Is there a new technology lurking in the background? The more we train ourselves to notice small shifts, the more likely we'll adapt before a crisis hits. Create a culture of experimentation. Give people space to try new things, but put some parameters in place. Let's say you have a monthly innovation sprint where teams can tackle any challenge they want. At the end of the sprint, they share results. That's enough structure to keep it focused, but enough freedom that people can run wild with ideas. Beware of red tape. If you find yourself or your organization saying, this is how we do it, period, that's a red flag. Question whether certain processes might be outdated. Does every little decision really need 6 levels of approval? Don't fear course corrections. A tightrope walker is constantly shifting. Likewise, leaders should be comfortable saying, we tried it, didn't work, let's adjust. Admitting mistakes or pivoting isn't a sign of weakness. It's how you avoid the extremes of order or chaos. Invite diverse perspectives. One of the best ways to beat change blindness is to surround yourself with people who see things differently. Encourage your teams or even your customers or external partners to challenge your assumptions. Sometimes a fresh set of eyes can catch that slow-moving shift you've been overlooking. We're in a period where massive shifts are happening globally. Technology, climate change, social values, you name it. Traditional hierarchies that we inherited from the industrial revolutions are slowly fading. We're seeing more small, interconnected teams and ecosystems of small companies working together rather than one big monolith controlling everything. Technology now allows even a tiny startup to have a global impact. In this world, being flexible, perceptive, and collaborative isn't just nice, it's non negotiable. All right, so thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this editorial has sparked some new ideas, or at least giving you a fresh perspective on how to navigate our weird, crazy, chaotic, ever evolving world. Next time you feel the wobble underneath your feet, remind yourself it's not about standing still, it's about making those micro adjustments, staying curious, and leaning just enough into both order and chaos to keep moving forward. So until next week, remember that, you have to keep that creative energy flowing. And I'll catch you on the next episode of the Creative Leadership Podcast. Thank you. Take care.